Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Jim.
How are you?
Doing peachy. How are you doing?
Well, I'll say, Sarah, that as I continue through this first season of blogging The Bachelor with you, I've had my fair share of times wondering whether this was the perfect season to start blogging about The Bachelor or the perfect season to stop watching The Bachelor.
Bingo.
That's quite a contrast.
One and the same.
And so what I found is that as we come out of a week's episode, I do find myself having things that I want to talk about with respect to the episode, but in some ways it's becoming less and less about the particular details and more about how this process has gotten me thinking about how and why this show works the way that it does.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to do for our episode this week is to kind of split the difference. I'd like to have basically two conversations with you. The first of which talks more about the show as an institution, how it's evolving and how it's currently operating or failing to operate.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll wrap up with a discussion that's a little more nuts and bolts, because this is a significant week on the show. I mean, anytime you go from 10 or 11 cast members to 4, it's odd that the show does this. It's not only the biggest drop,
Mm-hmm.
it's one that happens in, a really crucial part of the season. So I think there's a lot to talk about there.
Absolutely. I ditto everything you said. I feel like I have expressed to you, I have felt so torn watching this entire season, especially after last season with The Bachelorette, the Claire Tayshia season, and it was everything I wanted, and it exceeded my expectations. Are you kidding me? Tayshia and Zach and that proposal.
Yep.
Oh, it was great. That's why we watched the show. And
I think it's why we were so excited about the idea of launching a blog on this season, because we were hoping, I think, that a lot of what we felt like was good that was going on for the franchise, not just for Tayshia,
right,
going to cascade into
right
new situation with our first Black Bachelor.
Right. They started conversations on the show with contestants that they had never really covered before. And so, yeah, I feel like we were really optimistic, very hopeful, and honestly, since episode 1,
yes.
It's been just hard to watch. And I'd like to, Jim, we're newbies to this. Obviously, yes. We're amateurs. We are learning as we go. And some people may or may not be tuning in for some or all of this ride with us. But we got our first comment after last week's show. And I just wanted to touch on that because I think it was directed to me. Okay. And some of my commentary. Someone put in all caps, accountability culture is not the same as cancel culture. And I just want to be very specific. I still stand by, I think what happened with Chris Harrison is textbook cancel culture. That does not mean I agree or disagree with the consequences of what happened. But if you look up what cancel culture is, it is someone saying something offensive and then essentially being canceled culturally, losing jobs or losing subscribers, losing influence. That's exactly what happened, people. And it's not because he didn't do something wrong. I'm also standing by, like, he does need to be held accountable. I think that's also part of why cancel culture exists, is that there's that accountability piece to it. So I think it's classic textbook. I don't want to go into more reasons whether or not he should be brought back on or whatever. It happened. I think I think the show and the franchise needs to be held accountable. And to me, I think everything with the extra interview with Rachel Lindsay and Chris Harrison, which we're going to dive into, I think every week it has just become a little bit more apparent during the season that there are so many issues within the franchise. And it's starting to really make me question whether or not this is a show I want to get behind. Because sure, Chris said the things that were probably on his heart. All right, he is one person. We have all made mistakes. He needs to learn. I hope he grows from those mistakes. Unfortunately, he is doing it in front of the whole freaking world on a public stage. So yeah, that's pretty painful. However, the show has yet to say anything. They have not made any statement. And if you look at all of the behaviors or everything that has happened just this season, from episode 1, Chris Harrison had a sit down with Matt James, and he kind of disregarded and did not really like respond appropriately to Matt James' concerns about being the first Black bachelor. So that was, and I'm not blaming Chris Harrison. I am really upset that the show did not like prop Chris Harrison up or handle it entirely differently. They have missed opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to kind of make some really good waves moving forward, not even just with Matt James, but with a lot of the other women of color during this season. And I think that is really painting a more negative look for the show as a whole. And so I just wanted to make that clear. I'm upset at the franchise.
Yeah. And I appreciate you doing it, both because, we, like you said, we are both rookies at this, and because I think that, your perspective on this dovetails really nicely with this thing that I wanted to talk about, which is, yes, like how we judge the ongoing aftermath of the interview that Chris Harrison had with former Bachelorette lead Rachel Lindsay on Extra. But the tack that I would like to take with it tonight is to explore it in the context of everything else that we know about how the franchise works, which involves its politics racially, but also just kind of involves, how it's organized. And this is the way that I've been thinking about it. I think that for a long time, it's been apparent to a lot of us, we lost some of our naivete when it comes to The Bachelor, and we've come to realize that The Bachelor has a face that is the what it would like us to think about it as a show in general, as directed by its host, Harrison in particular. And then what common sense has caused us to realize about what the show may really think and feel, in particular about what it can and can't, what it should and shouldn't do to its cast members. I'm going to try and be as succinct about this as possible so we can get into it, but I want to at least set up the situation. Here's what we know about our host, Chris Harrison. A, he is the butt of some of our jokes, but generally because we love him dearly, right? B, a fair amount, though not all of our affection for the show does seem to be pretty well entwined with an affection for Chris in all of the kind of like ritualistic things that he does on an episode by episode basis, but also just kind of like his, kind of now fun uncle role that he plays with the lead and with.
Can I just? Okay, never mind. Actually.
Okay, so I think that what we're learning more and more and more is that if we had a really good sense of what happens behind the scenes, where Chris has an important voice, as well as in front of the camera, where Chris has a really important face and voice, I think many of us are coming to realize that there is quite a dichotomy between what we get to see and what we're supposed to think the show wants, and then actually driving its decisions. For example, and this is we could offer all sorts of examples, but these are the most timely. Let's think about the Heather Martin situation. Let's think about the late addition of 5 women into the fracas that was already crazy competitive to begin with. And let's think about the fact that Queen Victoria got as many episodes on the show as she did. I'd be the first person to say that I don't think that any of those things happened to the betterment of Matt James's love prospects.
Correct.
Except maybe that one of the women in the group of 5 is someone who he legitimately seems to be clicking with.
Right.
But
Michelle,
I'm going to argue.
Bring it home, Michelle.
I'm going to argue that the show knew that Michelle was going to be someone that Matt James would connect with. As such, they introduced her in the first 25 easily, right? So Chris, in each of these situations, plays the innocent, plays the sympathetic ear to the women in the house, to Matt, who struggles visibly in these situations. And, any bachelor would do so, but one of the things that we've learned about Matt James is that for all of his wonderful qualities, there were some ways in which he wasn't quite ready for prime time. Bachelor or otherwise. And
hold on, pause. Can we pause there? Again, I think that goes back to this is an example of the show. I think is just like check boxing diversity and inclusion on the show. Like, okay, if you are planning on having a different bachelor, you have to like change some things within your current practices to accommodate, to adjust the landscape. Like, it's going to be a different experience and you need to address that. And so that is also the issue with the show, that they did not do their preparation, their due diligence to ensure that it would be a positive or as positive as possible of an experience for Matt James. Yes. They treated him like every other bachelor.
Right.
And that is a mistake.
Yes. I think this gets to the core of it. And so let me kind of jump to the first of my conclusions. And that is that, I think that the franchise is in denial at best. I think you're absolutely right that the show did have to change in important ways beyond just the color of the faces of the cast members in this season. I don't think the show thinks it needs to change. I think the show thinks we got this down. So we're going to invite some people of color onto our cast more and more all the time. But don't you think that that means that we should stop being the Bachelor in every way we've been the Bachelor, because this is a winning formula? I think you're absolutely right. And when it comes down to, so how did this thing with Rachel Burkhamper happen? Like, how is it that someone with her social media past how to not only come onto the show, but to survive so many rose ceremonies? And because we know that it's not just Matt's call when it comes to who's sticking around. I mean, we've done that for a long time.
Right.
That he's given a list of women that he's supposed to give roses to. But he may be given a short list of women he needs to give roses to, in addition to all the other ones that he wants to keep along. You better make sure that these three, whomever, in your pack. That's all we ask. Okay, do that, right? And I think that as a result, what we should conclude about what happened in that interview is that we got to see a little bit more of the true face of the franchise. Because in an unedited version of that interview, we got to see what would probably be more apparent to us as Bachelor viewers if that show were unedited, right? If that show was not packaged in such a way as to show a particular face to its audience. And I think that all the show cares about, and I know in doing this, I'm kind of casting aspersions on the show in general, Chris in particular. I'm not saying that I'm right about this. I'm just saying that this is what makes sense to me. What makes sense to me is that the show doesn't really care about the ultimate happiness of its lead or that of any of the other contestants. I think that when great ratings that can coincide, then everybody's happy, right? And I think that the show is ultimately much more Machiavellian than that. And I think that for those of us who watch the show objectively, I think the evidence is right before our eyes, right? That there are a lot of people in the audience who are in a state of denial, and it's really easy to be in that state of denial if your politics don't line up with progressive politics. Right? And so, I don't know that the show, I think the show could argue that it tries to be apolitical. But I think we're living in a time in which
probably.
It's really hard to be apolitical, right?
Yeah.
You either choose A or you choose B. There aren't necessarily choices in the middle. The fans are the ultimate judges.
Right.
And, the one question I would have about the term cancel culture, because I certainly don't want this to boil down into an episode about, terminology, is that I think that Chris has a hard argument to make that he was treated with an unfair cancel, because I think an example of the unfair cancel would be someone dredging up a picture on social media, if it had existed, of Chris in his 20s, doing something like dressing in blackface or something like that. And then Chris was not given an opportunity to attempt to both put that into some sort of perspective that some people will not want to hear, but at least he's had the opportunity to do it, and then to talk about how he has changed since then. He was caught, and to the extent that he will be canceled, in a live interview, in which he had the opportunity to say whatever he wanted to say. And that's what he chose to say. So what I'm really curious about is whether we will see Chris Harrison again on The Bachelor. Because
I, Jim, do not think he can come back. And also this is a little bit my hope. I don't think, but I don't know. It's a gamble. I think the show is showing us its true colors right now, and is also making me question if this is a show I want to continue to watch, because I don't necessarily agree with all of it. It was entertaining. I don't know if it's entertaining anymore. However, I think this would be the perfect opportunity for them to shift gears. Chris Harrison has had his time. We need a new host in there. This is a perfect time for them to shake it up. And if they continue to claim to make progressive strides and being inclusive and having a cast and production and a show that is representative of the society and the world that we live in, this is their chance to do that. And they should have a new host on there. And I think if their barometer of that is how Bachelor Nation feels about it, freaking Bachelor Nation wants Chris gone. Like, I am not saying whether or not I want him gone or whatever, but like, I do think this is not the way I saw it going, but here we are. We're at the fork in the road. And so I think this is the time to pivot to a different host. And I think that all of Bachelor Nation, or maybe not all, but I think the loud majority of Bachelor Nation, being fiercely led by Bachelor Nation contestants, former contestants that are being very vocal now about it, do not want to see Chris Harrison back on the show. But I don't know. What do you think, Jim? Do you think he's going to be able to come back and not get any more flack? Do you think he's going to come back and get flack?
More and more, I think that the fate of the show moving forward is going to rest on this decision. I personally, we started the season with my talking about reasons why I felt like the franchise had outlived Chris as its lead for reasons that in some ways have nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. In general, like, I don't think his connection with the cast, by virtue of his difference in age, is what it was 19 years ago when the show started. But here's what else I know about Chris. The longer the show has been on, the more important I think Chris has been to the show.
Yeah.
That it's not gone in the opposite direction.
Right.
I think it's possible that we could see this as being a decision that Chris will be making about Chris. And here's the decision. You know, does Chris believe that his continued on-screen involvement with the show, what it does for him and what it does for the show, is more important? Or does he believe that the ongoing financial future of the show is more important? Because I don't know that people necessarily make rational decisions in situations like that. And I think that what we heard in that interview, if we keep in mind that Chris is not just a host, right? He's a kind of owner. I think what we heard in that interview was Chris is saying as smoothly as he can, I'll do what I want to do, right? That don't y'all dare get in the way of making Rachel our next hot product. And I think that could be either because she is Matt's chosen one, or because she is at this point the show's chosen one for the next season of The Bachelorette, which you could argue is a bigger win these days than being even Matt James's wife. And so because of all of that, I am going to say that I think it's quite possible that at the beginning of the next season of the franchise, which at this point would be Bachelorette in about May, I think Chris will be back. I think he'll have an important, maybe extended moment with the television audience in which he talks about lessons learned and how he's going to move forward. I don't know that any of what he says will convince any of us that anything dramatic has happened for Chris, other than that he has heard the voices of the viewers, right? Which is different. I gotta tell you, it's different than having some sort of, come to Jesus moment. Pardon the term.
Yeah, you can't just read books. Like, you have to actually do some action and put yourself out there and have conversations with people you've never had conversations with. Really, like, try to hear other perspectives outside of your own. And you're not just going to do that from a book. You have to talk to real people. You have to, like, immerse yourself a little bit. And I mean, I really hope you are not right, Jim. Like, I
do too.
It is scary to think, if that is what happens. Okay. Question. If that happens, how do you think that will affect Bachelor Nation?
If he stays around? Well, I think he would stay around because the long and the short of it is that Bachelor Nation is made up of, a politically diverse range of viewers. And I think that what we have learned from, or what we've been reminded from the last presidential administration, is that, the American attention span to particular incidents is, in fact, rather short. And this is not about Chris coming back for any live episode happening at the end of this season, this next season, which is to say, this is about like 3+ months from now. The voices calling for Chris's firing are necessarily, I think, going to get quieter and quieter as the months go on.
And yet, well, okay, sorry,
go ahead. Because
it has been such a turbulent year, and even in Bachelor Nation, and so, I mean, I know that you are predicting, and it's not necessarily what you want to happen. Right. So I want to make that clear. Right. But I also think that, I don't know, like, I think Bachelor Nation is getting more woke, as Chris Harrison probably does not like. And I think last year was a turning point with George Floyd and how Black Lives Matter and the protests kind of infiltrated Bachelor Nation and the fan base. So, for example, Becca Kufrin, who was the former Bachelorette, and with Ari, and she now hosts the podcast with Rachel Lindsay, Bachelor Happy Hour. So last summer, she was pretty big in the news because her and her fiance, Garrett, split up. And just like visibly, like, I'm sure there's a lot of issues about it, but I think views on race were a part of that. And if we look back to 2018, which Chris Harrison seems to think is 500 years ago, that was 2018 was when Garrett and Becca were like coming out as an established couple from the franchise. And a similar situation in now recent history, that Garrett also was under the microscope and got so much heat and flack because of some problematic social media, racially insensitive social media. I don't know exactly what it was. I just remember hearing about it, and he had a crap ton of flack, and the show and the franchise got a lot of heat about it. So that was 2018.
Right.
And, just like frame of reference, 2018. Because race wasn't an issue then, apparently. But so yeah, last summer, I think that our world, like, people are just really waking up to issues of racial injustice. And I think the people will not let it fly. So.
Yeah, it occurs to me, Sarah, that there may be a part of this calculation that I'm not acknowledging, and that is that The Bachelor is such a franchise for ABC, let alone for Mike Fleiss, Chris Harrison and the rest, that if they believe that the preservation of the franchise is going to come down to having Chris Harrison leave the position, then that might be what does him in. I think it would be sad for the show if they couldn't make that decision themselves. Mm-hmm. I think it's quite possible that that this could rise to the level that that would be taken out of his hands. Because, I mean, consider what kind of programming space ABC has given to the show over the course of the last, I mean, it's more than Dancing with the Stars, and Dancing with the Stars has been, a great hit for ABC. I mean, it kind of rivals the horse that ABC was riding when it had Who Wants to Be a Millionaire back in 2000.
Fun fact, Jim, our host, was also on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire back in the day. So you can find that on YouTube, I believe, right?
Yes, it's all true. Yeah.
Okay. What year was that?
It was the year 2000. It's likely there are things that I said on that show that could cause others to think differently.
Cancel you?
But nothing that has a radio cast to it, I don't think.
Oh my gosh.
So let's just say, because I do want to kind of wrap up this segment so we can move on to something else, but
sure.
Let's just say that if nothing else, part of the reason why we can't know Chris Harrison's ultimate fate is because, The Bachelor is still going to be front and center in folks' mind as long as the season lasts. And we've still got a couple weeks left. And, it'll be interesting to see, for example, can we have the kind of, you've never seen something so controversial before closer that we've come to expect from The Bachelor if Chris Harrison is not the person orchestrating it on stage? Is it possible that however things turn out for Matt and his maybe future bride, that after the rose ceremony falls flat? I'll just say that I think this could be a very different decision for the show, ABC, etc., if there were a person or multiple persons that they felt like would do a more than adequate job of, being an on-screen presence for the show to take it in this new direction. I think if they had someone in the on-deck circle for Chris, whoever they think they might have or don't have, we're going to be seeing them soon. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to, and I don't know that we should assume that the person that's going to be the lead of that episode is the person who they think could take over the series, but it wouldn't be a bad time to try someone out.
Right. Do you think, Jim, so for me personally, I feel like even just in this last week, it's just hard for me to watch, because all of this is pre-recorded. The show is pre-recorded.
Yeah.
And they've already kind of expressed Chris Harrison is involved in all of that filming, and but there's the public acknowledgement that he's not going to be involved with after the final rose, but they already filmed the Women Tell All, which I am assuming Chris Harrison hosted, which will probably be aired as it is. But how do you feel watching the show now, knowing all the stuff that is involved? Do you feel like there should be a disclaimer at the top of the show, or there was no acknowledgement before this first episode after all of the heat, after all of this? Do you feel like they should do that? Do you think it's in their best interest to do that, or to completely ignore it?
Well, I don't think this is just like my gut. I don't think that they think that it's necessary. I think that they could be pushed to do so, pushed either by their corporate overlords or by their ultimate bosses, the fans. You know, if ratings for the show were to fall out of the floor, you know, between now and the end of the season, you know, that could be that in a lot of different ways. You know, the franchise could be canceled. Chris could certainly be canceled. But I think that they aren't being particularly proactive about how they're dealing with this, other than to have Chris say that he's stepping away for a time, which is vague, right? And I think that the fact that they're not being particularly proactive tells us something in and of itself. You know, in a way, it kind of feels like they're playing a game of chicken with those people who could control their fate. And I know that they are reading everything and more that you are all of this, because they know that in many ways, this social media universe that keeps them alive 24/7, 365, for better and for worse now, maybe at times, is something that they see a need to continue to support and cultivate. And so I think maybe the typical fan, call it what you will, I think maybe the typical fan does have a little more sway in this than they might believe themselves. The fact that the show is such a juggernaut. So,
well, if I can be so bold, Jim, I think Matt James is the Bachelor because of the fan base demanding need a black lead. Like, I think that is the perfect example. I don't think the show was naturally going in that direction. I think it was the fans that petitioned for that, and now that's the case.
Well, so let me close this segment of ours by offering, as I do at times, offering my dear franchise a suggestion. I think that we should say a fond, if nuanced, goodbye to Chris Harrison and thank him for all the work that he's done to make The Bachelor great. And I think that the show should hire 2 new hosts. I think they should hire a male host for The Bachelor, and I think that they should hire a female host for The Bachelorette. In large part because I think the dynamics of conversations between Chris and female leads is not something that's been a glaring problem for the show as of yet. But I do think that it's not, like, I think that we should care about a woman's voice in these situations in general. I think pairing a woman with the female lead makes sort of sense. I think having a woman host for The Bachelorette might, in fact, affect in positive ways the kind of tone on the set with the male cast. I think it could cause them to behave in perhaps different and generally better ways. But I also like this idea that at least the show would be giving some, making a gesture towards seeing itself as being a little less traditional than it always has. And since I've made this suggestion, let me go ahead and suggest who I think that host should be. I don't know who the host of the men's show should be, but I think I know who the host of the women's show should be. Any guesses?
Okay, let's hear it.
Any guesses?
Rachel Lindsay.
Correct. All right, let's move on. Question, Sarah. How do you go from 11 cast members to 4 cast members in a span of 2 hours? We know how Matt did it, right? And I think that Matt did it in maybe a slightly unconventional way. I don't know that anyone would advise you to ask a woman out on a one-on-one date. Justenia, as a way to give her a protracted goodbye.
And yet, hold on, and yet that is what Tayshia did with Easy. And do you remember that date? They had like the haunted house date.
Yes.
And it was kind of sad.
Yes.
I think it was kind of similar. This was pretty parallel to me.
I appreciate that comparison. I don't know, in part because I don't think I was shown. I don't know that I saw any particular connection between Matt and Jasenia.
Nope.
I certainly didn't feel Jasenia in the same way that I did feel Easy. I was happy that he got
the one-on-one
from Tayshia. And I thought what she did was classy. I'm not saying that if Matt had dealt with Jasenia some other way, it would have been unclassy. But I am saying that it didn't make for interesting viewing, for one.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that the date between Tayshia and Easy was actually really fun.
Amusing. Yeah, it was funny.
In fact, I think perhaps, my friend, I think that perhaps the more appropriate comparison is between the Easy date, no dates are easy, the Easy date and the Katie date.
Okay, yeah, correct.
Fun, right?
Yeah.
They clearly have a friend connection.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite convinced that Jasenia and Matt have a friend connection. I think in part because we didn't really get to know Jasenia as anything but like an understudy to the Katies who are going to be proactive about chemistry issues at the house between the cast.
Yeah, her main storyline was just with MJ, right?
Yeah.
So it was her versus MJ.
But, you know, speaking of how Matt got 11 from 11 to 4, I want to ask you a series of rhetorical questions, except I want answers for them. So I don't know if they're rhetorical questions or not. Okay.
All right, shoot.
Okay. Question number 1. If you had a vested interest, as I think the typical bachelorette does, in being one of the final 4, would you, A, when the opportunity, tell Matt James that you love him, or B, when given the opportunity, tell Matt James that you're feeling closer and closer to him all the time, but not use the L word at this point in the show? Is it a good strategic move, regardless of honest or not? Is it a good strategic move to tell the lead that you love him, or is it too early?
That is a really good question. And you were being specific about that with Serena, right?
Yes.
I don't even know. Well, okay. What I think the good strategy is to always be truthful. And so I think truth prevails, Jim. And I do not think that Serena is in love with Matt James. It seems pretty clear to me there is no chemistry there. It is like they are friend zoned. I think at this point, after the what was it, the tantric yoga date, I think that Matt likes the challenge. It's a little bit of the chase at this point for him. But Serena, I mean, she's slow to warm up to. It's a slow burn for her, maybe, but I think the best strategy is to be truthful. And if she doesn't love him, she shouldn't say it.
It's interesting because, like, I actually asked that question in reference to Jasenia.
Oh, what?
Now, I don't remember if Serena...
Wait, did she say that she loved him?
She did. She did. And I think that she said she loved him, not because it was an authentic kind of gesture in the moment.
She loves him as a person.
Although we best be careful about what we say in the moment, right? Because there's a lot there with that word. I think that she said it thinking back to previous franchise scenarios in which the lead was quote unquote waiting for someone to tell him or her that he or she loved him or her, what pronouns. I think that it was kind of a desperation play.
Yeah.
And as such, my answer to my rhetorical question would just be really careful about how you say that. But since you bring up Serena, right? If you are legitimately interested in a woman and think that she, at this point, is a consideration of yours for your final four, do you ask her out on a day that A, is going to just be good times, or B, is going to be a date that's going to like test her in some way? And the test isn't one necessarily of like passing or failure. I don't think that Matt brought on that date to see.
You're just trying to peel back the layers to see how does this person react or navigate the situation. Absolutely. That is what I would do, because you have limited freaking time, okay? And so you need to see how that person is going to manage those situations. So
you think Matt made a good move?
I am like behind Matt James. 919 all the way. Like I think that there are things he probably could handle better, but I think in how he is handling the dates, I think that was a good move.
And how did you think Serena handled it?
I also loved how she handled it. She was truthful and she was like, I mean, I did it because we had to, and now I can say that I've done it and I'm never going to do that again. I don't want to do that again. I think most women probably would have not reacted that way. She was pretty blatantly honest about how she felt about the date, and most every other woman, and let me specify woman, most every other woman probably would have said, oh, it was so great. I'm so glad that I got to experience that with you. And she was honest and direct, and I loved it.
Okay,
and
Sarah.
They're not going to end up together, and I'm also great with that.
Okay, because my follow-up question was going to be, do you think that what happened on that date will play at all in Matt's ultimate decision? And if so, how? Because I think it could play in two different ways. One,
he's more attracted to her.
She seems like a what?
He's more attracted to her because she is outspoken.
Okay. So you think it will ultimately work to her advantage if her desire is to continue on in the process?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. One more question for you, Sarah. You are in consideration for the final four, and both you have a strong connection with the lead, but are not positive that he is going to put you in that final number, right? Do you tell him, whether it's true or not, do you tell him that you just quit a really great job, continue on with the season, or do you keep that under your hat?
Yeah, that seems like a very strategic move. I don't even know, Jim, how to answer that. I have no idea. I don't fault anyone for anything in that situation. It's funny because after that episode aired, Brie, I now follow her on Instagram, but she posted this hilarious photo of her looking, if I may say so, looking super fine and on a cell phone, asking, her like caption was like, me trying to ask for my job back, which I thought was hilarious. Which I just hate that we are not seeing these women's personalities. We've only seen the drama. They need to change how. Anyways, so what do you think? Because I'm torn. Well, it was strategic for her, but I'm torn.
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of nuance there. I think that it didn't feel manipulative.
Right.
It didn't feel necessarily smart.
Right.
But, you know, Sarah, let me take something that you just said as a way for us to close. And that is what you just said reminded me of what I think was my favorite part of the entire episode.
Michelle at the end.
Yes.
Doing push-ups. It was so good. And how, if they do not end up together, I am going to be so upset. She is so funny. And why are we not seeing more of that? If she is not chosen, she needs to be the next freaking Bachelorette. Also, she has such a great story. She is a teacher. There are so many teachers, fans out there. Like, during a pandemic, we need to hear this story, okay? Amen. Why is that not the story that is being told on this show?
Well, and, you know, I agree with you. That was the scene I was thinking about. I agree with you for all of the reasons that you stated, and maybe one more, and that is in a season in which there was so much contention between the female cast members, the reactions that her fellow bachelorettes had as she was doing it, the credit, the props that they gave her for finding that moment, and then the testifying that they did to how, like, this is so Michelle. I thought to myself, oh my God, like, Michelle is incredible in ways that they haven't even shown us. Mm-hmm. It's a problem for the show, I think, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's all a part of, I'm going to loop us back to the very beginning. It's all a part of, you know, The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, the whole franchise is in large part a product of the product that they are creating for us and then showing to us. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that they always make the best decisions they show us. And in fact, it reminds me that one of the things that I like and prefer about Bachelor in Paradise to Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and I feel like The Bachelor in Paradise in many ways is like perfect for the summer, you know, because it's so much looser, part of the turn of phrase, is I love the fact that there is so much humor on that. Mm-hmm. And generally it's like, it's not humor poked at someone. If anything, it's people poking humor at themselves, right? The little outtakes they do with, like, the animals, you know, on the coast and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. Like, I just think it's kind of campy. It's kind of funny. Mm-hmm. Maybe humor doesn't play enough of a role on the show, because I'll be honest with you, if I was...
Well, okay, sorry, real quick. I think that's what happened what went well with The Bachelorette. I feel like there was a lot more of that silly humor with Bennett and with Ed, and like his sit down with Chris Harrison. He ran into Chris Harrison's room, or he had the baby. Like, there were so many more sillier moments, and that is what works for the show.
Yeah, like a little bit of mockumentary, you know?
Yes.
Like, the show takes itself too seriously sometimes, and then at times it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And I think it's really easy to get a little whiplash from. And I think its version of what is successful serious and what can be successful serious are two different things. And I think that Tayshia last season on The Bachelorette really showed that, you know, that series doesn't have to be somber, right?
Correct.
Authentically funny, authentically hard, authentically adventurous, authentically whatever, you know, like
Hannah Brown was authentic.
Yes.
And as much of a mess as it is, it's entertaining, and people love to see it. So
you've testified to your love of Matt's dancing with no music on.
I'm here for it.
Matt's karate lessons.
It's great. We need more of that.
You know, imagine this season of The Bachelor if Matt had started making charcuterie boards already, right? Folks, that's all the time that we have for this week. I am Bachelor exhausted, but thanks for making another run for the roses with us. I'm your co-host, Jim Meyer. This has been your
My gosh, we didn't even introduce ourselves, I guess, but
this week's episode is brought to you by us. That's right.
Thanks for tuning in to Printing the Final Rose. Stay safe, be well. See you next time.
Maybe, yeah.